it is. It says starts with films. So it's just kind of different fan theories. So I guess spoiler alert, because it'll be fan theories about the shows or TV or films. So I guess there could be spoilers with this. So watch at your own risk. So the very best films grow richer with each viewing, unfurling new depths of meaning each time. But what happens when viewers look to create their own meaning? So-called fan theories have become a booming talking point in the age of the internet, with film lovers often scrutinizing their favorite movies for hints of some secret narrative or dark twist. While many of the theories shared, for example, on Reddit's fan theories forum, are far-fetched and thinly substantiated, every so often someone is able to put a spin on a film that gives you a genuine pause for thought. So, sometimes they sound utterly ludicrous, Jar Jar Binks being the devil in disguise, but then when you hear the evidence, you can't help but wonder. So, here we're gonna get started. So, the Pixar theory. One of the most notorious fan theories in cinema, this spurious hypothesis seeks to situate all films produced by Pixar within the same canonic universe. There's fodder enough to support this idea. Characters are constantly cropping up in other films. In Blink, and you'll miss some Easter eggs. And sure enough, in 2017, Pixar shared a video that seemed to confirm that this theory had legs. With each new release, however, the theory becomes a little more tenuous. So, Star Wars Jar Jar Binks is a Scythe Lord. So, this notorious theory posits that Jar Jar Binks, the buffoonish, amphibious alien that becomes a hate figure within the Star Wars fan base following the release of The Phantom Menace, was in fact a skilled villain the whole time. There are a number of curiously convincing pieces of supporting evidence for this theory. His chaotic fumbling movements that shockingly managed to defeat opponents in battle, somewhat resembling the fighting style of Zhu Khan or drunken boxing. He uses hand gestures when trying to convince people of things, a Jedi mind trick, and he ends up insinuating himself into a senatorial position, ultimately putting in place Palpatine's takeover of the Empire. Far-fetched? Misa, think not. The Tarantino theory. So, much like the Pixar theory, this argument revolves around the idea that every film made by Quentin Tarantino in fact takes place in one universe. There are tidbits that support this theory. Pulp Fiction's Vincent Vega and Reservoir Dogs. Vic Vega are brothers. Donnie Donowitz from Inglourious Basterds is father to Lee Donowitz in True Romance. All characters smoke the same brand of fictional cigarettes, Red Apple. The theory is based on the idea that films such as Reservoir Dogs and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood take place in an alternate reality, one where Adolf Hitler was killed in a hail of bullets and fire at the end of Inglourious Basterds. Tarantino himself has partially confirmed the theory to be true, but stipulated there are in fact not one but two shared universes his films occupy. Guardians of the Galaxy, everyone is swearing except Peter Quill. So, as shared on Reddit by freelance astronaut, this theory explains why all the characters in Guardian of the Galaxy cuss and swear like they're in a film for kids. In the movie, many of the alien characters are not, in fact, speaking English, but are having their language translated for Peter Quill, Chris Pratt, and the audience via Quill's universal translator. Quill, however, was abducted from Earth when he was still a small child, meaning the kind of swear words that these rough and ready rogues are using simply wouldn't be in his vocabulary. chocolate factory, not a reward, but a punishment. Willy Wonka is a sicko, there's no hiding this, of course. The man spends the majority of the film runtime doling out bespoke punishments to a gaggle of small children. At the end, he rewards the pure-hearted Charlie Bucket with inheritance of his magical chocolate factory. What this theory put forward by Reddit user Master Laws posits is the ending is not a happy one at all, rather by bestowing the factory on little Charlie. Wonka is inflicting his worst punishment of all, a lifetime spent being a dysfunctional, vindictive recluse. The theory casts a pretty dark pall over what was already a prickly, sharp-edged kid's fable. So, Aladdin, one last wish left. At the start of Disney's animated classic Aladdin, and I suppose the dire live-action remake, down on his luck pauper Aladdin discovers the magic lamp and uses his first wish to ask the genie, Robin Williams / Will Smith, to make him a prince. This happens, of course, and he has transformed into Prince Ali Abbawa, intending to court Princess Jasmine. As the plan goes awry, he has to use up his second wish to save his own life. After using the third and final wish to free the genie, all ends up happily. After all, the Sultan allows Aladdin and Jasmine to marry anyway, turning him into a prince. Given that the genie has the ability to see centuries into the future, it's entirely possible that everything that happens after wish number 1 was simply a circuitous means of transforming Aladdin into a prince, which also means that he still has one wish remaining at the end of the story. Did someone say sequel? Toy Story and his parents are divorcing. The Toy Story films are never really about the humans. Andy and his family exist on the periphery of the first 3 films, despite their monolithic importance to Woody and Co. Regardless, eagle-eyed fans of the series have claimed to track a narrative running through the glimpses we get of Andy's life, and it's not an entirely happy one. It's hardly an open and dry case, but there are some reasonably sturdy bits of evidence. The fact that Andy's father is never seen, and the lack of a wedding ring on the mother's finger. The Rock Secret Bond sequel, so Michael Bay's 1996 escape from prison thriller sees Sean Connery play a disavowed ex-spy who's been sentenced to years in a high-security prison. According to this theory, Connery's character, referred to as John Mason, is in fact an older version of James Bond. The timeline adds up, and it's stated in the film that John Mason isn't his real name. The theory is certainly compelling, but maybe not intentional. Producer Jerry Bruckheimer denied the thought had entered the writer's mind. Inside Llewyn Davis, Mike is a corn fiend, so the Coen brothers' masterful folk elegy inside Llewyn Davis sees Oscar Isaac's prickly musician haunted by unspoken grief after the suicide of his friend and singing partner Mike Timlin. While the film sees Llewyn bounce from sofa to sofa, catching a bed from any casual acquaintance, he comes back multiple times to Mitch and Lillian Cornfein, Ethan Phillips, and Robin Bartlett, whose relationship with him is never explained. There are several subtle hints, however, that they are in fact Mike's parents. Their house is located near the bridge he jumped off. Lillian refers to the late character as Mikey and knows his harmonies. Timlin would be a plausible stage name for an aspiring singer named Cornfein. Of course, the notoriously explanation-averse Coens have never clarified whether this theory is true. Mad Max. There is only one story, so the chronology of the Mad Max franchise is hard to get your head around. Is Fury of Mad Max, the world seems to change between each film, as does Max himself. What this intriguing theory claims is that all the films are in fact the same story about the same man, only told by different people. In this interpretation, the story of Mad Max is something like a folk legend, a tale that keeps being reshared with a different spin on it. So, Skyfall, Bond Revisited. So another 007 related fan theory here, and a popular one at that. The line of thinking goes that Kincaid, the shotgun-toting Scottish recluse, played by Albert Finney in 2012 Skyfall, was in fact a part written for Sean Connery, making the character in fact an older incarnation of Connery's James Bond. The speculation was partly confirmed by director Sam Mendes, who admitted that the producer had a definitive discussion about Connery playing the role. What does all this mean? Skyfall more or less ties both Craig and Connery's Bond films into the same universe, and arguably all the other Bond films by extension. Taken as canon, this would confirm the theory that James Bond is nothing more than a code name, that there have been a line of different Bonds taking the role after each other. Beau is Afraid. So, Ari Aster's recent surrealist comedy Beau is Afraid is a treasure trove of symbolism and Easter eggs. It is pure, unfettered theory fodder, one of the darkest theories. However, concerns an unnamed character who is glimpsed in the background of several scenes during a flashback to a cruise. Beau, played as an adult by Joaquin Phoenix, went on as a child. The sinister figure is easy to miss, appearing on the edge of the frame, eating an ice cream or simply lurking, giving Beau is Afraid's broader fixation with sexual dysfunction and trauma. People have suggested the figure was in fact a child sexual predator. The film is subtly hinting that Beau was abused while on the cruise. Astor himself has hinted at this in interviews. So, Bird Box, The Rapture. So, in Netflix hit thriller Bird Box, the mere sight of the unseen monsters drives people to brutally kill themselves, prompting survivors to live their lives blindfolded every time they leave their house. One popular theory, however, posits that the monsters were in fact angels, and the film was depicting the rapture. The Blair Witch Project. There is no Blair Witch. The seminal 1999 indie horror is built almost entirely around the implication of danger, with the titular Blair Witch never actually appearing in the film. Because of this, some fans have theorized that the creature does not in fact exist. Aspiring documentarians Michael Williams and Joshua Leonard Adelaide Heather Donahue out to the woods, staged some of the spooky occurrences, and then murdered her. There are some logistical reasons why this was almost certainly not the canonic explanation, but it nonetheless adds a chilling new dimension to the film. Inception, The Totem. Yeah, I have actually watched this one, okay. In Christopher Nolan's dream-diving thriller Inception, characters are told to create a personalized totem to help them determine if they are in the real world or a dream. It is suggested in the film that Cobb's, Leonardo DiCaprio's totem was a spinning top inherited from his late wife Marion Cotillard. It is a spinning top on which the film is ended, with audiences unsure whether Cobb is still in a dream world or not. For many viewers have pointed out that Cobb would have had his own totem, with some suggestion it was in fact Cobb's ring. The final scene, Cobb is seen without his ring, suggesting that he is satisfied that his reality is the real deal. Marvel, Stan Lee is the Watcher. Before his death in 2018, legendary comic book artist Stan Lee appeared in a multitude of small cameos and adaptations of his work, including every film within the Marvel Cinematic Universe (MCU) franchise. These appearances were seemingly unconnected, with Lee playing everyone from a bus driver to an alien servant to himself. However, after a while, fans began theorizing that Lee was in fact playing one character the whole time, an intergalactic observer known in the Marvel comics as the Watcher. Writers soon cottoned on to the theory in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Lee's character, now an astronaut, is seen speaking to two Watchers, making reference to his past exploits. Get Out, it's all in Rod's head. So, in Jordan Peele's acclaimed satire, Lil Rel Howery plays Rod Williams, a TSA airport officer and best friend to Daniel Gouling's Chris. This fan theory argues that the events of the film, after Chris heads to meet girlfriend Rose's, Alison Williams' parents, are in fact the fearful imaginings of Rod. This would supposedly explain the film's ending, which sees Rod show up to save the day. However, Peele has debunked this theory in an interview. Jurassic Park. Owen Grady met Alan Grant as a child. At the start of the original Jurassic Park, Dr. Grant, Sam Neill, scares the bejesus out of a cocksure child using a velociraptor claw. Was this in fact the child that grew up to be Owen Grady, Chris Pratt, by the time of Jurassic World? The ages match up, and it would certainly explain Owen's respect for raptors. Pratt, however, has said he doesn't see it. Star Wars Episode 8, Snoke. Snoke is Plagueis. The backstory of the villainous Supreme Leader Snoke is left frustratingly vague in the Star Wars sequel trilogy, with Andy Serkis' character being unexpectedly sliced in half towards the end of The Last Jedi. However, some fans have suggested he was in fact the much talked about Dark Plagueis, Palpatine's former master, whom the nefarious Sith one day usurped and it was believed killed. That would certainly explain the scarring on Snoke's body, and the Snoke musical motive that fans also identified in the Revenge of the Sith scene covering Plagueis. So, Shrek, Donkey was a Pleasure Island child. The beloved animation Shrek draws from a plethora of classic children's fairy tales, giving them a reverent 21st century spin. Eddie Murphy's Donkey, however, was one of the few characters not rooted in a famous story. Or was he? Viewers have speculated that Donkey is in fact one of the wayward children from Pinocchio, who was transformed into a donkey on a pleasure island and sold into slavery. There are nuggets that support this interpretation, of course. The character makes fleeting references to past, seemingly human experiences, for example, wedgies, and no one seems to have seen a talking donkey before. The Shining, Kubrick's moon landing confession. I'm not sure any film has been as endlessly theorized about as Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, so deep and labyrinthine were the theories that there was a whole documentary film focusing on some of the biggest ones called Room 237. One outlandish theory argued that Kubrick had used the film to admit his involvement in faking the Apollo 2 moon landing, and even used his 1968 film 2001: A Space Odyssey as a research and development project. The evidence is dubious. Naturally, an Apollo 11 sweater landing badass shapes in the carpet, and Kubrick's right-hand man, Leon Vitali, has described 70 to 80% of Room 237 as pure gibberish. Okay, that was a lot there. We'll see if there are any more. So, Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon syncs with The Wizard of Oz. So, this one predates the internet and probably came about in a hazy dorm room with hi-fi and a VCR. The theory goes that Pink Floyd's classic album. Dark Side of the Moon syncs perfectly with The Wizard of Oz in that the song lyrics match the on-screen action. The first and most obvious problem with this is the album is 42 minutes and 50 seconds long, while the movie has a running time of 101 minutes. However, there is some validity here if the album starts on the MGM line's third roar. The first few tracks do match what's going on in Kansas, and then when the Great Gig in the Sky starts, that's when the twister shows up. All the lyrics and musical transitions can be interpreted as sync with the movie, but it probably helps if the viewer can release their imagination. The band has denied writing the album this way, but that has just fueled the conspiracy further. Sandy died on the beach at the beginning of Grease. So, at the beginning of the 1978 movie Grease, Danny Zuko meets Sandy Olsen from Australia, and they have a beautiful summer romance at the beach. Then she inexplicably shows up at his American high school, and they eventually get their romance back on track, but with some weird supernatural elements thrown in. The theory is that Sandy drowned at the beach, and the entire movie is the seconds of life. Imagine what could have been with Danny. This is one of the more believable fan theories because it explains what the movie couldn't. It's not very likely that Sandy would randomly show up at Rydell without knowing that's where Danny went. The movie is also filled with angels and impossible transformations, but the end is what seals this conspiracy. After the big dance number, Danny and Sandy get into his car, grease lightning, and fly away together. The Sarahs send into heaven, and come to think about it, maybe Danny drowned as well, trying to save Sandy. Wilford in Snowpiercer is Willy Wonka. So the title character in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory operates a whimsical candy manufacturing plant, but is anything but a kindly kid-friendly host. He is a strict authoritarian who severely punishes dissent and even enslaves a race of people. If that sounds strangely similar to Wilford from the Snowpiercer film, that's because there's a theory they are the same. First, there are W's all over the train, just like in Willy Wonka's facility, and the vehicle shares many Industrial Revolution as well as Art Deco design cues with the chocolate factory. Willy Wonka had Oompa Loompas running his operation, while Wilford used children to run the train engine. At the end of Willy Wonka, he gives his factory to Charlie. At the end of Snowpiercer, Wilford tries to give the train to Curtis. Wilford is a post-apocalyptic Willy. The Fast and Furious sequels are Dominique Toretto's Coma Dreams. At the end of The Fast and the Furious, Dominique Toretto flips his 1970 Dodge Charger, going 100 miles per hour, and rolls it dozens of times in a spectacular but non-survivable crash. There's a theory floating around that Dominique did survive but ended up comatose, and all subsequent Fast and Furious sequels are his coma dreams. This is another one that helps explain the otherwise unexplainable events. In a coma dream, a group of petty thieves and street racers could become an elite special ops crew that fights global terrorism, but not in real life. This theory also helps explain why everyone who dies, Letty, Han, Giselle, etc., come back to life, or how Dominique's charger keeps reappearing after getting totaled. The only flaw in this otherwise sold theory is why Dominique's first two coma dreams, Too Fast, Too Furious, and The Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift, barely involve him. Phasma lives again. So the Star Wars sequel trilogy was divisive among fans, and some argued that it was too similar to the films that came before, with the notable exception of Captain Phasma. The Big Silver Stormtrooper Commander was a fan favorite, but unfortunately perished in The Last Jedi. The good news is there is no way Phasma is dead, and it involves the, for lack of better terms, Star Wars falling down a hole theory in which no character dies, falling into a hole. Okay. Luke Skywalker jumped down a huge shaft to avoid joining his father, and he was fine. Boba Fett fell into the Scarlet pit but climbed out to get his series. Darth Vader chucked the Emperor down a shaft, and he somehow came back 3 movies later. Darth Maul was lightsabered in half before falling down a shaft, and he was intact at the end of Solo. Phasma died when Finn blasted her, and she fell into a fiery hole, which theoretically means she lives. She would be just as alive as all the characters who came before her. The Shining was Stanley Kubrick's fake moon landing confession. Here's a movie conspiracy theory that involves the real-life conspiracy theory. The 1969 lunar landing was faked and man never walked on the moon. An extension of that conspiracy theory is that filmmaker Stanley Kubrick directed the lunar landing hoax. There is no doubt, due to the realistic spacecraft and spacewalk sequences in Kubrick's 1968 masterpiece 2001, A Space Odyssey. Going for the conspiracy theory trifecta, The Shining is allegedly Kubrick's confession for helping fake the lunar landing. The theory is both flimsy and intriguing in that there isn't much evidence but a bunch of inexplicable space stuff in The Shining. There are rockets on the carpet and subtle space-themed decorations all over the hotel. The big piece of proof, however, is that Danny is wearing an Apollo 11 sweater, and when he stands up, he emulates a rocket blasting off. He then travels to room 237, which is room 217 in the book, and the moon is 237,000 miles from the Earth. This one is a clear case of reading way too much into a great horror movie. Peter Pan is the Grim Reaper. For many people, there has always been a sense that something was a little off about Peter Pan, so accepting that the theory that he was the Grim Reaper or an angel of death is an easy one. In the 1953 animated Disney classic, Peter Pan, the title character, whisks the darling children off to a magical place called Neverland, where they will never have to grow up. Another way to look at it is that Peter Pan killed Wendy and her siblings, reaping their souls off to purgatory. It explains Peter Pan's supernatural abilities, as well as why the Lost Boys never age. There are no birthdays in death. Part of this awesome theory is that Captain Hook is a lost boy who escaped Peter Pan's purgatory and is now trying to stop him from killing more children, so he's the hero of the story. The theory falls apart because Peter Pan returns the darlings to the realm of the living, but that could also be a case of a near-death experience. We also really like Ruth B. Song's song Lost Boys. Jack from Titanic is a time traveler from the Terminator universe. The compelling fan theory has director James Cameron's universe is colliding. The story goes that Jack is a time traveler from the Terminator films who is sent back to save Rose from Titanic, who happens to be Sarah Connor's grandmother. The machines, aka Skynet, have sent many Terminators and Terminatrixes back to eliminate John Connor's bloodline so he can't lead the human resistance in the future. After many failed attempts, perhaps they went way back to nip it in the bud. This is a solid theory because Jack has knowledge of things that didn't exist at the time and had to gamble his way onto the Titanic, which is something a time traveler who didn't have any contemporary money would do. Presumably, Skynet arranged for an iceberg to sink the ship, and Jack was there to rescue Rose, so her family tree could sprout the future savior of mankind. As an added piece to the conspiracy puzzle, after Jack saves Rose, he sinks like lead weight, indicating that he's a reprogrammed Terminator model. Okay, it's a bit of horror. Kevin from Home Alone grows up to be Jigsaw, so easily the best movie conspiracy has Kevin McCallister from the Home Alone movies growing up to be Jigsaw from the Saw franchise. The evidence is quite compelling in that Kevin has a keen interest in rigging booby traps, bordering on sadistic, while Jigsaw makes punitive and deathly traps for his victims. It gets more intriguing because in the first Home Alone movie, Kevin's neighbor, Old Man Marley, is rumored to be a serial killer who eventually takes the boy under his wing. It's not a great leap of fate to think that Kevin could have grown up to be John Kramer, aka age of 52 in Saw 4, released in 2006, which would mean he was born in 1954. Kevin was 8 in the first Home Alone, set in 1990, meaning he was born in 1982. Timeline be damned, because the better world where Kevin McCallister is the Jigsaw killer. Soylent Green, 1973. So everyone knows the twist at the heart of Richard Fleischer's adaptation of Harry Harrison's Make Room, Make Room. If you don't, won't spoil it here. The climactic revelation is so powerful it sometimes overshadows the movie leading up to it, in which Robert Thorne, Charlton Heston, a near-future New York detective, follows one clue after another that exposes the corruption and inequality of an overcrowded, misery-filled city. Well, it's miserable for some. Soylent Green might be science fiction, but it's worth its world of halves. Using deception to live on the backs of have-nots is of a piece with other stories that use outrageous conspiracies to suggest closer to home truths. National Treasures, 2004, so a conspiracy theory movie for the whole family. Oh wait, I don't think these are a bit different. Anyway, I'll go back to actually conspiracy theories. I think I got sidetracked. I did something different there. Breaking Bad is the Walking Dead prequel, so through 5 seasons of Breaking Bad, Walter White was responsible for a number of horrific events, including his brother-in-law's death and a tragic plane crash. But one fan theory ponders whether his drug empire also could have resulted in the zombie apocalypse on The Walking Dead. The most compelling sign that Breaking Bad is a prequel to The Walking Dead is the presence of blue meth in both series. The seed for this theory was planted in the second episode of The Walking Dead, in which Merle's secret drug stash strikes quite the resemblance to the product that turned White into a kingpin. Further hints at a possible connection between the ANC dramas include a red sports car and characters named Glenn, Gus Fring possibly being Patient Zero, and the description of Merle's drug dealer as a janky little white guy, who Daryl quotes as saying, "I'm going to kill you, B-word." Breaking Bad's Jesse Pinkman does fit that physical description and sure did have a penchant for saying that particular B-word. Dylan Kickham. Was that like the person who proposed the theory? Okay. Yeah, we talked about that one actually. The Always Sunny characters don't actually look like that, so ever wonder how Dennis, Mac, and Dee look so attractive but seem to disgust almost everyone they meet on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia? One Redditor posits the characters are unreliable narrators and present the audience with idealized versions of themselves. Dennis uses cheap tactics and manipulation to sleep with women despite being conventionally attractive. Mac normally has solid muscles but is shown to be weak and not very intimidating. And Dee presents well, but no level-headed man is ever interested in her. We already know these characters are insanely narcissistic, so perhaps that extends to how they see themselves. Dennis and Dee are attractive in their minds, but in reality are unattractive, and Mac presents himself with more muscle than he actually possesses. Bender wasn't the Bender we know in the Futurama pilot, so the Bender that all Futurama fans know is a reckless, misanthropic criminal, but according to a fan theory, the foul-mouthed robot is only this way due to an electrical issue that we see in the pilot. In the first episode, Bender is uncharacteristically depressed after learning that he had been making suicide boots. Another important facet of the theory is that when Bender reboots, his personality is set to a mode that befits his surroundings, which happens in the episode where he becomes a penguin. The theory states that when Bender gets electrocuted in the Hall of Criminals, he reboots himself into a criminal personality of himself. So Scooby-Doo is about kids trying to escape to the draft. So the cartoon mystery franchise Scooby-Doo never really explained why a ragtag group of 4 dissimilar teenagers decide to travel in a van to no known destination. So a fan developed an origin story theory as to show premiered in 1969, the same year the Vietnam War was at its height. The Scooby Gang is driving to Canada to escape the draft. The theory posits the clean-cut Fred was drafted but ran away to be with his fiancée, Daphne, while hippie, Shaggy, and activist Velma joined them as they both opposed the war themselves. So, yeah, that is all for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. Please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. So, bye for now.